speed of decision must be tempered with balance or probing constructive thought. And during this process, if you're a logical thinker, you'll be drawn like a magnet to the conclusion that you must have a plan, and the goals process begins all over again. Then, of course, there are circumstantial goals. Suddenly your life takes a different turn. A bereavement, the company you work for closes down, or something happens in your church. You are now faced with life under different circumstances, and if you're wise and positive, you'll recognize the new opportunities and develop with consistent analytical thought new growth for your life, and in doing so, you will set goals. And there are many other goals. There are forced goals, imposed goals, subconscious goals, tentative goals, guilt goals, but planned lifestyle goals. And we've got to ask the question, how far am I prepared to go in order to reach my life goals? You see, if you want something tomorrow, you must plan something today. And do not ask others to set your goals for you. If you do that, you're relinquishing your God-given freedom of choice. When others set your goals, it destroys your personal accountability. What I'm asking you to do is alien to human nature. I'm asking you to think. And the thing that we have to watch out for is having goals that are in conflict with one another. It takes a special kind of self-esteem to go against the grain, but singleness of thought and purpose will develop the power drive to activate the law. 3 questions to ask yourself in goal setting. First of all, this dream that you have, this goal that you have, is it available or creatable by someone? In other words, could you see someone else doing it? Think of the person that has the most ability that you know. Could they do it? Remove yourself from it, because you'll always look at it with your own limitations. Then secondly, bring yourself back into the picture. Would it be right for me? Knowing my personality, knowing my pain level. And then maybe I should stop here and make a comment. I was asked to go on television some time ago to debate the free enterprise system, particularly as a wealthy Christian. And they had flown someone in that was going to debate with me and supposedly was going to tear me apart. And when I got to the television studio and the makeup was on, I was just about to go out, and because they flashed those signs for applause and the people were there clapping, the stage manager said, "Mr. Daniels, I have had to make a few changes." I said, "Such as?" He said, "Well, we don't have one person debating with you now, we have 4. Well, immediately I knew they were in trouble. And the first question was, "Mr. Daniels, is it true that you only own 1 pair of shoes?" I said, "Yes, that's right." They said, "With all the millions you've made, why do you only own 1 pair of shoes?" I said, "Well, that's quite obvious. I've only got 1 pair of feet." They said, "But you drive a gold Rolls Royce." I said, "Yes, I've only got 1 of them." They said, "Well, could you give us a definition for success?" I said, "Yes, the willingness to bear pain." I didn't say be a pain. The willingness to bear pain. We've got to step out of the comfort zone and move into the pain arena. Yes, would it be right for me? And thirdly, can I truly believe in it for me? Well, why don't we come down to the formula and see if we can pull all this together now and give you a very, very simple formula. Firstly, define your goal. Put it in writing. Define your goal. If you don't have a goal, make finding a goal your goal. Now you've got one. Clear it at the integrity level, clear it at the spiritual level, clear it at the intelligence level. You want it, you must have it, you need it. But remember, it must be expandable, because you're going to be an entirely different person 5 years from now than what you are now. And it must be consistently identifiable and measurable. And you must be prepared to trade your life for it. And the rate of exchange must convince you in the area of value. Define your goal. Secondly, set out your strategy. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Plans in progress mean power. A simple step-by-step movement towards your goal. Thirdly, plan out your problems. Wherever I go around the world, people tell me about their problems. Some people even say, yes, I've always had this problem. As a matter of fact, my father had that problem too. It's funny, isn't it? No, it's stupid. We are sons and daughters of the King. I mean, there are people here with physical problems and they're blaming that on their mental capacity. I have scars across my heart with rheumatic fever. I was paralyzed with meningitis. But I keep up a schedule that most young men would not be able to have a hope of keeping up with it. At 62 years of age, you'll need a gun, a whip, and a chair to handle me. I'm fit. But set out your strategy. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Plan out your problems. Recognize problems. Search out problems. Document problems. Solve your problems. Fourthly, build in reserves. This is a protectionist role. We ought to have spiritual reserves. Know your Bible. And know your Bible relative to what happens out into the world. Have friends reserves. How nice are you to people? Are you always doing things for other people? You know, it's nice to be nice. It's nice to be nice on the way up because you meet the same people on the way down. Have physical reserves. Even some of the young men here, I would beat them on press-ups because I'm fit. You see, we need physical reserves because when your body's finished, your ministry's finished. And we need mental reserves. I'm going to blow your mind now. You know what the average Westerner spends on their brains over a 10-year period? We've done surveys at the World Center for Entrepreneurial Studies. Less than $10 over a 10-year period on their brains. You spend more than that on underarm deodorant, your brain's not there. Wait for the qualification because many of you are going to suggest how much you've spent. When I was in Minneapolis, a taxi driver took me out and he heard my accent and he asked me some questions and what did I do? And finally he said, you know, I want to be rich. I said, well, that's interesting. What are you doing about it? He said, well, I'm taking a course in computers. I said, that's interesting. Tell me, the man that's teaching you computers, is he rich? He said, heck no, he drives a clapped-out Volkswagen. I said, well, what makes you think if that is your goal, if you're going to learn computers, that you're going to be rich? He pulled the motor car over the side and ran his hand through his hair. He said, I didn't think of that. But be logical. Build in reserves. And build in love reserves with your wife. I wake my wife up every morning of her life with tea and flowers. She deserves it. On her birthday, her 60th birthday, I surprised her and I had a famous singer fly in and sing Happy Birthday and do a one-on-one concert. Normally he sings to 10 or 12,000 people. Then I had a 7'4" painting of her made when she was 20 because we're going to a new house and we're going to build the house around this painting. Because I want, when people come into our house, to see my wife. She never gets on the television. She's never in the newspapers. She's never on the cover of the books. She doesn't want to be, but I want people to see who is behind me in everything. Gentlemen, have love reserves with your wife. We have been married over 40 years and we still go to sleep holding hands. She's not with me today. Our son came because we had to go to North Korea and it could be dangerous. But she travels everywhere with me. Build in reserves. Fifthly, relate to time frames. There's no good you saying that you have a goal if you haven't got a time frame. Look at where you want to be and come back in bite-sized chunks to where you are. The word determination is made up of the word terminate. Sixthly, create a workable master plan to get the job done. Get all the facts and dreams on paper. Divide areas into building blocks. Get short range, medium range, long range goals. Put them on paper. And seventh and finally, actionize it today. Make a commitment today that you are going to get it done. Now, when I spoke to David DeMola, who, let me say, I have seen just about everything in the world that there is to see, I think. I have never seen a local church put on anything like this in the third of a century that I have been a Christian anywhere in the world. I tip my hat to him. But I want to do something else. To his wife, I bow to her. I asked David, would he like me to show you the kind of things we produce at the World Center for Entrepreneurial Studies? And he anxiously said, please, I want you to do that. But now I'm asking you, do you want me to show you? Yes. Okay. But please, I don't want anyone to spend money they haven't got. I mean, you don't become wealthy, you don't become stable going into debt. So I'm going to show you, it's right at the back there. We have to take what we haven't got back to Australia, and we have another function to do after this. But let me go through it very quickly with you. The first book I wrote was called How to Be Happy Though Rich. It showed me sitting on my Rolls Royce. It cleared the sinuses of every Christian pastor in our nation. I was tired at the way businessmen were being treated, and I was tired at the way that we would ask people to pray for us when we really wanted them to give us some money. And so I created a formula of what I did in giving, and I showed people how to give money away, but also how to earn it. They did a whole television program in our nation, nationwide. The government paid for it. A Day in the Life of Peter Daniels. And there are 4 questions in this that you should come to grips with. It's now been recognized throughout the world as the 4 questions to greatness. Question number 1, what age have you set yourself to reach your full potential that God might maximize your life? Question number 2, could you tell me in 50 pages or more what your full potential is in every area of your life? Question number 3, accepting your full potential as 100%, what percentage rating would you give yourself right now? And question number 4, accepting the deficiency between the 2 scores, what plans are you going to make to take up the shortfall and when? That'll keep you busy for a while. The book, How to Reach Your Life Goals, has a great deal more in it than what I just shared with you there. I'm on the international board of the Hour of Power television program and Dr. Robert Schuller, and when Bob read this book, it kind of blew his mind. And he then asked me to give him 40,000 copies so that he could use on television to raise funds. After I agreed, he then said, would you please make them leather-bound? But on August the 22nd, I think it is, if that's a Sunday in this country, that'll be right across America. That's our most popular. I couldn't tell you how many we've sold, but I know it qualifies for the New York Times bestseller list, and we don't even sell in bookshops. The next one that I did, and bear in mind that most of these are done anywhere between 15 and 18 hours or longhand. Someone said to Rabina once that I'm sure Mrs. DeMola has been asked too, what's he like to live with? And Rabina said, best you don't know. She said, but he's motivated all the time. And someone said that's not possible, and they came to me, so I wrote the book, How to Be Motivated All the Time. Remember that motivation is deeply personal. No one can get in your mind and your body and act it out for you. You may find that interesting. Because my son spends 40% of his time free of charge getting Christians out of bankruptcy and out of debt, I wrote a book called How to Handle a Major Crisis. The formula in this is for any crisis, but it's particularly for financial crisis. It's probably saved more people from suicide and saved more people's lives than everything else I've done throughout my life. The next one was because I do receive so much. I think the last major seminar I did for executives, I had over 30,000 executives in one meeting, and I'm probably one of the highest paid speakers in the world. I was asked to write a book on how to have the awesome power of public speaking. It's interesting to me that a parliamentarian told me many years ago that I'd never be able to speak in public, and I now teach parliamentarians how to speak. This book is a formula for handling rejection. It's called Miss Phillips, You Were Wrong. When they buried Miss Phillips some years ago, they buried her 60 feet in the ground because deep down she's a real nice person. But I had to put up with rejection all of my life. I am totally colorblind. I cannot tell a color. I sold ladies' fashions and paint. I have so many problems and some physical problems. And I've had to overcome rejection, particularly coming from a very poor background. We were not ordinary poor. We had to reach up to touch bottom. That's how poor we were. And when I first started making really interesting money, I couldn't cope with it. I went down the beach and just curled up in the sand in a fetal position. I just couldn't handle it. I can handle it well now. But that was what I had to do, and I remember the first time that I made $200,000 in an hour or so. That kind of gave me a shock, but we are quite used to that nowadays. Let me show you some of the other programs we do. Now, some of these are expensive, and I don't want people to spend money they haven't got. You know, it just doesn't make sense. This one is called How to Get More Done and Have Time Left Over. It has a manual, 3 cassettes, and a video. I only work 5 hours a day. I don't want you to think that I'm a workaholic. I don't even get up early. I think if God wanted me to see the sunrise, he'd shed it a little later in the day. I'll watch it on video. I usually arrive at I get up at 8:30. I arrive at the office at 10, just in time to have morning tea with my son. We go and have morning tea. We do a little bit of work, and then it's time for lunch. We do a little bit more work, and it's time to go home. And Graham doesn't come into work at all on Wednesdays, and we phoned him in the last trip from the United States, and it was a Thursday, and he was home. And we said to him, Graham, it's not Wednesday. What are you doing home? It's Thursday. He said, no, but Thursday's close to Wednesday. And, and he was out riding some of his polo horses. This is probably the fastest selling success program in the world. It's called Destiny. It's a 3-part tutorial. It deals with 3 areas: how to create a support base, how to handle your imagination, and how to build life goals. We have our students all around the world. We have seen people 40, 50, and 60 years of age that have exploded and changed their lives. I've had full-grown men and women weep on my shoulder, say, I just felt I was born for something bigger. I felt there was something inside, but I couldn't get it out. They got involved in our Destiny program, and it just changed their life completely. I have a couple of young men that just a few years ago were poor. They're probably worth 3 or 4 million each today on that. It's for people who want to do something major. You take it home, you respond to each lesson, we correct it, and then at the end you get a diploma. But the other interesting thing is the World Center for Entrepreneurial Studies has the largest single human resource base on the face of the earth. And once you become a Destiny member, then you can contact us free of charge for the rest of your life if you need any help or guidance in anything that you're doing. But it's a little interesting. It shows you how that you'll never get knocked down again. It's the first time in science and literature we've shown the imagination vertically and horizontally, and we have charts and ways in which you can set your life goals. And we correct each one and send them back to you. We're pretty harsh in our correction because we don't like to see people fail. It's also in video and cassette. Now finally. Paul said finally 3 times. So this is the world launch for this, and I asked David if I could do the world launch here in New York. This is a new book called How to Create Your Own Dynamic Mission Statement That Works. Do you realize that never in the history of the world there's ever been a book written on how to create a mission statement? A lot of people talk about goals, but you know, the more people I meet and the more I'm involved in international business and with international governments, people tell me that the journey was more important than the destination. But there's very few people even know how to create a mission statement. And if you can't write down what your journey is, it's going to be pretty hard reaching the destination. We show you how to do it personally, we show you how to do it corporately. But because it's a world launch, we have done something different. We only have 3,000 of these for the whole world. If you're interested in investment, and I'm an investment advisor, this is a special investment because it is a limited edition and will be an investment and worth a lot of money in a few years' time. Each one is numbered, and it has my signature in gold in there. But as well as that, I was asked to write 2 other books, one on how to bounce back from failure, and I didn't have time to do it, so I did a video on it standing inside the stock exchange. And I give the 10 principles of how to bounce back from failure, and a cassette on what I call bottom line thinking. I think quite differently to most people. I'm able in a couple of hours to work out a process whereby I can easily get $1 million, and it takes a while to think up those kind of things, but I've got a different sort of a thought pattern. I think very much differently than most people. Let me now wind up. They'll be at the back. We have a limited number. You cannot get them in bookshops. We only sell them at the World Centre for Entrepreneurial Studies. We have them with us. If you order it from Australia, it'll cost you more for the postage than it will for the book. So I'm not advocating that you do that. The limited edition there, we have a number here that I hope will satisfy the people here, but it is also an economic investment because it will grow in value. Let me wind up. I said to you in the beginning, I wanted to find out what made the great great. One day I ran into Rabina. I said, Eureka, I found it, I found it, I found it. She said, what have you found? I said, I found out what makes the great great. She said, well, what is it? Is it being at the right place at the right time? It is enthusiasm, comes from 2 Greek words, en theo, the God within. What is it, Peter? I said, well, I'll give you a mini biographical tour. And I told her about the life of Sir Winston Churchill. As a young man, he was fighting a war in Africa, and he wrote a letter back to his mother, and he said, dear mother, I was out on bivouac today, and we were ambushed. I took my revolver out, and I rode my pony straight into the enemy, and I dispatched 3 immediately. I turned my pony around and dispatched 2 more. I was as cool then as I am now writing this letter to you. Nary a bullet touched my tunic, my pony, or my person. I believe I was preserved for higher things. Have you found out what makes the great great? Dr. Billy Graham, as a young man, went out under the stars to pray one night with some other young men. It had been raining during the day, but at night the skies cleared and the stars twinkled in the moonlight. And some knelt down to pray, some put their hand up to heaven, but they heard a muffled sound behind them, and it was Billy lying flat out on his face, weeping in the mud, saying, oh God, let me do something, but anything. Have you found it? What makes the great great? Giuseppe Garibaldi, and I have to put this in for David's sake, the Italian nationalist, was on a Marseille waterfront cafe, and he heard of the ideal that was to shape for him a glorious future and the ideal of a united Italy, and he became great. Henry Royce was unwilling to accept anything but perfection, and he became great. Wilbur and Orville Wright were excited about the possibility of manned flight as a toy with a rubber band at a birthday party took to the sky. Their father was a clergyman. He used to preach from the pulpit and say, man will never ever fly in the air. That is the realm of angels. And the 2 boys were building an aeroplane out in the barn. And then, of course, Thomas Edward Lawrence of Arabia, was studying the map one day. He saw the city of Damascus. He was gravitated towards it. He had a dream of putting an Arab king on his rightful Arab throne, and he became great. And then Albert Schweitzer. As a young boy at school, he was wrestling with another boy. He got the other boy down. He said, there, I've beaten you. But the little boy looked up with tears streaming down his cheeks. He said, Albert, I could have beaten you. My family could afford to feed me properly, and it broke his heart and sent him to Africa. Have you found it? What makes the great great? Finally, my friends, I came back, as I always do, to the Word of God. And again, I read the story of Jesus that said, I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. What makes the great great is a sense of destiny. A sense of destiny. And you can have a destiny by doing three things. First of all, have a lifelong lifestyle goal-setting program. Goals to the end of your life. Secondly, by imagination, cut the fetters from your mind. Allow it to glide as it was divinely designed to do so. And the more I study thought technology, the more I'm convinced that the imagination is far more powerful than the will. If I was to put a brick each end and put a 12-foot piece of wood here, I could walk up and down, I could do it, everyone here could do it. But then after we've done it, let's put it 1,500 feet in the air with nothing to hang on to it. A 3x2. Suddenly our imagination takes over from our will and says, what if the wood slips? What if the wood breaks? What if my foot slips? What if the wind blows and we can't do it? And then finally, you've got to build a support base and understand who you are before God. And that's why I was asked to do that program. And God has blessed it right around the world. One of the great privileges I have is I meet quite regularly with the movers and shakers of this world. One of them in Europe is so big he would make Aristotle Onassis look like a popcorn salesman. He would make Donald Trump look like a newspaper boy. He's a godly Christian. He's in his 90s, and he's probably the greatest organizer I've ever seen. When you go into his office, it's like a James Bond movie. You see some things twinkle over here. He says, God is good. A ship is launched in Korea. Something else happened over here. He says, we've had a good coffee crop in Jamaica. And all day, he has a glass desk with nothing on it. All day, every hour on the hour, his managers come in from all over the world. He's got a special method of giving their report, some things on the front that he can look for soft spots. He will not fire anyone because he says, if I fire anyone, that will take adrenaline and I won't be able to make decisions. He is the greatest entrepreneur the world has ever known. And we try to work out what made this man great. He's one of the biggest missionary givers in the world. He allowed us to put someone with him for 3 months to stay in his home, and we checked up to find out what made him different, what made him great. And they came back with a report, and it was very much the same as anyone else. Unfortunately, he got up early. I don't do that. A lot of people that get up early. But he works on a theological thesis every morning. He does his Bible reading, his prayers. He then has a shower, something to eat, and makes phone calls. But then he goes and sits in a room alone, looking out at the mountains. No one's allowed to disturb him. He has no book, no Bible. He doesn't pray. He'd done that earlier. He just sips coffee for an hour. And that was the only thing that we could find that made him different. And finally, we nailed him down. We said, is this what has made the difference in your life, that has made you the greatest leader and the greatest entrepreneur in the world, that has allowed you to keep yourself secret and away from the press? He said, possibly. We said, well, what do you do when you go into that room for an hour? He said, you wouldn't understand. We said, well, if you do the same thing every morning? He said, yes. For how long? He said, over 60 years. Well, what do you do every morning? You would not understand. Well, try and help us understand. What do you do in there? He said, I think. We said, what about? He said, you wouldn't understand. Now, I'm about to pull the pin out of a hand grenade and throw it right in the center. Finally, he told us what he thought about every morning for 60 years that made him the greatest entrepreneur the world has ever known. I'm wondering whether I ought to keep it for tomorrow morning's meeting. Shh, listen. I'll go at the back after and I'll stick around if you want me to sign books or anything, but this is important. What he thought about for 60 years, every morning for 1 hour, that he claims has made him the greatest entrepreneurial leader, and I would say one of the greatest Christians in the world, was this one single thought. How does God run the world? How does God run the world? He said, if I can concentrate in on that thought every morning and think about and strategize how God runs the world, and I can get any measure off that, I'm going to run my life and my business better. How does God run the world? Does that get your attention? That'll give you something to think about for the next 12 months. Let me close. It seems it's time to dream again, both wide and very high. It seems it's time to dream again and be great before I die. It seems it's time to dream again of empires great and vast. It seems it's time to dream again with something that will last. It seems it's time to dream again and accept God's sovereign will. It seems it's time to dream again and move from being still. It seems it's time to dream again and to build my life anew. Yes, it seems it's time to dream again. It is time for me and for you. Ladies and gentlemen, may God expand your life until your destiny is fulfilled. God bless you.
I think they